Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband Jim. And we are sitting here on Sunday. We're actually back downstairs at our kitchen table because we're getting a few people say that our volume is not wonderful in what we were putting together as our podcast room. So we're going to go back to the drawing board and try to figure it out.
The 12-foot ceilings and the hardwood floor.
There's a carpet here that we're sitting on,
Yes.
and so I'm thinking I'm going to have to put a rug up there and do some other things to try to make it a little less echoey.
Mhm.
But anyway, so we are sitting down here, and our son and daughter-in-law just left from visiting all day, so we're getting a little bit of a late start, but that's fine. You held it in as long as you possibly can.
Well, they don't like to talk about AI.
Well,
They kind of roll their eyes.
they like to talk about AI, but they don't
Right.
like to talk about it as in depth as you like to talk about it.
I don't know. I don't think my family is as much into AI as I am, which is
I
weird.
don't know anyone who is into AI as
You
much
are.
as you are. I don't.
Right?
No,
Okay.
no.
All right,
sorry.
moving along. The news.
All right, so first we're going to cover some things that whenever I was like, all right, Jim, what are we going to talk about? You're like, well, the first thing we're going to talk about is some things that are like really bad ideas.
Have you ever seen Terminator?
I've seen Terminator.
And you've seen Terminator. There's like 3 of them, right?
There's a lot of them.
News.sky.com. I'll let you go with the headline on this one.
First known test dogfight between AI and human pilot carried out U.S. military. So basically,
an AI-run fighter jet went up against another controlled by a human pilot in a drill, the U.S. said. The aircraft flew at up to speeds of 1,200 miles an hour.
That's not a good idea.
That's literally Terminator.
Not a good idea.
This is such a bad idea.
So they're allowing, and there's even a video of it.
It was a drill over Edwards Air Force Base. The pair of F-16 fighter jets flew really fast, and they did aerial combat. There was a human in the one controlled by the AI, but supposedly the AI was in charge. I just don't think this is a good idea, but you know what? The military is going to keep marching on.
The military knows better.
Well, no, they just think it's always got to learn new ways
Bigger,
to
better,
destroy
faster.
things.
Yes.
Anyway,
speaking of destroying things, the next one
under the category of
military
of a bad idea.
Okay.
This was in SecurityWeek.com.
All right.
U.S.-China competition to field military drone swarms could fuel global arms race. Remember that commercial? It was like an insurance commercial where the drone swarms were chasing everybody and they're all running and screaming, and that was a commercial we saw not long ago.
Was it probably a Super Bowl? Probably a Super Bowl commercial.
It might have been, but I think it was an insurance commercial or something.
Okay.
The drones were all over. This kind of made me think
Well,
about that.
there have been, I mean, think about all the light shows.
Those are drone swarms. You know that's where it's coming from.
Drone swarms when
Absolutely.
They're doing like all the different spelling things in the skies and all the different, pictures that they're putting in the skies. Those are all drones that were programmed to be at certain GPS coordinates at certain times.
Yeah.
Well, this is AI driven drone swarms.
The world's only AI superpowers are engaged in an arms race for swarming drones that is reminiscent of the Cold War. Now that I remember the Cold War really well. So do you.
Mm-hmm.
That really wasn't great. Why would we want to repeat that? But apparently we want to repeat that by having our fleet of killer robot drones.
Now, one thing I think a drone swarm should and could be used for is something that we actually presented to the Texas Education Association, and we would love to continue
human control,
pushing that forward. Would be, but does it have to be 100% human control?
It wasn't going to be 100% human control, but most of it. And ours weren't trying to kill people.
Well, no, it was a way to deter. It was a way to deter a bad actor in a school.
School shooters.
Yes.
Yes, it was a framework we wanted to put together in conjunction with the state and federal government, along with one of the universities and some companies, to build out a framework for an active school defense system. Mm-hmm. And yes, drones were part of that, but we had a whole plan to have humans involved, and they weren't supposed to kill people.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, moving right along, this is more for an educational angle. But you and I talk about this all the time. This is actually an article in Medium AIGoPuppy.com. So it's kind of a medium. Anyway, I hate AI detectors, and you should too. And why do we hate AI
I agree
detectors?
100%. AI detectors, there are so many false 100%, 80%. This was written by AI, and it's not always true. I saw something the other day on LinkedIn where a guy was talking about how one of the words that is constantly picked up by an AI detector is being used by AI is the word delve. DELV. Let's delve into this. Let's, delve. And they're
So we're going
saying,
to kill that word.
so it's going to kill that word because I use delve in my writing quite a bit. It's kind of like plethora, Rachel's favorite word. Plethora is not a common word that people use all the time, but it's
So
one of my
we're
favorite
supposed to make
words.
all of our words vanilla and
Very
common words
vanilla,
now.
very
We
common.
can't use words that make you sound smarter. That used to be how you made people think you were smarter, is you use bigger words. But apparently you
Well,
can't do that anymore.
I write articles and you write articles for Medium. And one of the things that I did it today, I wrote out a framework for an article I wanted to do. And I put that framework along with like the first and the second paragraph into ChatGPT 4. And I said, this is the article I want to write. Please have me, help me, give me some ideas. What would you add? What would you, and there were some of the sentences and some of the things that the AI said that I thought were really good. And I was like, wow.
But you
Absolutely.
still wrote most of it yourself.
Yeah, that's not the point. The point is when I looked at my paragraphs, I'm comparing what I am saying to what the AI might have said for me to say, and I'm dumbing my writing down. I'm actually going
That's
in and
sad.
I'm changing words in my paragraphs because I don't want to get accused of an AI writing my work.
Well, in our case, it's really not that big of a deal if we use AI. I mean, what we're trying to do is tell a story or whatever. We like to write, so we write together and we do these things ourselves. This particular person that wrote this article supposedly gets paid to write, and the person she was writing for did not want it to be AI generated for whatever reason, and she said it wasn't. But she had some interesting stuff here where she said originality.ai, which is what her stuff was ran through that claimed it was AI written. Their false positives happen in about 1.56% of the cases of AI detecting false positives. But my experience, she said, only applies if you follow their rules, which use make sure you don't use AI tools to create, edit, or plan your article. Never edit with a tool like Grammarly or Microsoft Editor. Avoid formulaic content such as intros, recipes, academic articles. I don't know if what she's saying is actually true. I mean, she could just be somebody that hates AI and therefore wants to say you shouldn't, never use any of those tools. But we have seen the false positives, and we've
Well,
also seen how easy it is to beat these detectors.
well, I have been a user of Grammarly for years.
You
I,
have,
I use
you have,
Grammarly all the time because of the, commas and punctuation is
right?
very
Punctuation
important
is
to
a big
me.
deal for
It's
you.
very
Yes.
important to me. And so now I am noticing that when my Grammarly is on, it is doing more suggestion of sentence structure,
Yes.
like rewrite this for clarity or, use this word
Mhm.
instead. And quite often I'm having to go, that's not really what I wanted to say. And so I'm dismissing a lot more. But
Yes.
no, I can see how someone who just says accept, 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 accept
Well,
would
because
get
sometimes it
something.
sounds good, but
Yeah, it does.
anyway, we teach, and if people hire us to come in and talk to schools or whatever, or if we're talking at conferences, we always teach the same thing. There's a process, not a tool.
Very last thing
And
you
what
do.
this person's biggest complaint was that I did agree with was that the people that were doing this weren't using a process, they were just using a tool and relying on it very heavily because they're thinking of it as a cheating detector.
Yes.
So anyway, don't do that.
Don't use AI detectors as the number one thing.
It's a process, not a tool. So let's move on to better news. This is AIbusiness.com.
I think it's awesome. It's about how AI systems can detect Parkinson's disease from brain waves. It is a study that they've come out with that is very interesting. And the reason I find it interesting is because Parkinson's is actually really hard to diagnose. One of the things that they look for is the hand tremor,
which is what my grandfather had.
and it is, but there's I worked for a neurologist for quite some
I
time,
remember that.
and the hand trimmer for Parkinson's is very different than just a regular hand trimmer because people do get trimmers when they get older.
My dad has them, but I don't think he has Parkinson's.
Chances are pretty good that he has the early onsets of it, but he's old enough now that the early onsets are not going to be a medical problem as he continues to age. But the trimmer is like it's a rolling of the hand versus just an up and down of the
I
hand.
think he does roll.
Yeah, the roll is more of a Parkinson's thing. But what the doctor has told me, and the neurologist even said, is that since they don't really have a good diagnostic tool for Parkinson's, they just treat it.
Well,
They give you the medication and they say, okay, here's a medication that you may or may not need. If your symptom gets better, then you have Parkinson's.
Well, the researchers created an AI-powered system capable of detecting early signs of Parkinson's disease from brainwave recordings. So this may be that detection tool.
And guess where it was at? Guess where they're doing this research at?
In the UK, yeah, I know. Here, it feels like we're falling behind in
It really
AI
does.
so badly
It really
because we're
does.
spending so much time arguing about where instead of using it for medical cures, we're making drone swarms for the military.
Or making sure it doesn't call a cat a dog.
Yeah, I know. We're so paranoid it's going to be wrong. We forget that tools can be wrong. That's why we have doctors.
Yes.
They're supposed to have the final say. So
agree.
anyway, this thing had amazing accuracy. 95.79% accuracy on one data set, 99.83 on another. So they apparently have a lot of brainwave recordings.
Well, what they did is they took people who do have Parkinson's, that you know they have Parkinson's, and they did the brain recordings of all of those patients. And then they took a whole bunch of people that did not have it, and then they had the AI look at both sets of brain waves to see which one it would detect.
Well, I think also what they've done is they've got these electrocardiograms that have dated back years and years that have shown the progression of, in other words, if you've gone into the doctor and had EEGs,
Electroencephalogram.
Is that what they're called?
Yeah, electroencephalogram.
They mentioned the electrocardiogram for the heart too.
Oh, okay.
But they're talking about it, the AI system extending to
to like the heart diseases.
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff.
Not Parkinson's. But anyway, you're right. I mispronounced it. But
okay.
Either way, you looked at me like I had no
I was
idea
confused. I was like, wait a second. I know
You
we're talking
love
about
correcting me, and I know you do.
I don't get to do it very often.
You do it all the time. Anyway, it's a cool tool. So moving right along to a very long, this is journals.plus.org. I don't know what that means.
Okay, I'm going to read this one because I think this is the longest headline we've ever covered.
It's a long
And the reason is because it's really not a headline. It's actually the title of a paper, of a white paper was what we call them.
Yes.
So large language models approach expert level clinical knowledge and reasoning in ophthalmology, a head-to-head cross-sectional study.
It's ophthalmology.
Ophthalmology.
Your East Texas is showing. Anyway, the
study of the eyeballs.
Exactly. Basically, they're saying that the ability for it to diagnose or to assist and figure out what's going on in your eyes, which makes sense. I mean, these things,
electrical stuff. It's
patterns. It's patterns. And you take pictures of your eyes, and you can zoom in and all that stuff. Every time I see one of these, I look at this as a tool to help a doctor. I don't look at this as a tool to replace a doctor. GPT-4 in its current state was 69%. I mean, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But
any
again,
help helps.
Well, and
what do I tell you about it when it comes to us making money? Whenever we go out and train somebody and you're like, well, Maurie, I don't know if it's enough. I'm like, Jim, something of something is better than nothing of nothing.
Yeah, well.
69% is a huge help.
It can be. So anyway, it was an interesting study. It had lots of big words in it. The people's names in this thing were even, I try to pronounce that guy's name. But it was interesting. It was done by the Monlau Mayo Clinic, Scottsdale, United States. The editor was Monlau. It was the Mayo Clinic, Scottsdale. So anyway, which is
good. Something in the United States. Mayo Clinic is huge. Yeah.
Okay, so now we move along to my weekly rant.
Okay, so we moved along to this one because we still have about 15 minutes left. And I know that once we get off on this topic, we're going to be talking about this topic for the next 15 minutes. I might even have to cut you off like I had to do last time.
That's totally true.
All right.
So where did this
I'm
start?
ready.
Where did this start? Well, this started because our oldest son is thinking about, right now he's a paramedic,
And he feels like he has no
and they're
growth
basically
potential.
working him to death.
Yes, they are.
And because they're always shorthanded, he gets paid less than people that work
The
at
people we need the most
Costco,
are the ones that get paid the least.
so he's working, I don't know, so many hours,
Oh,
it's ridiculous,
he-
like 80, 90 hours a week.
He is, and yes, some of those hours are overnight, and he's there if there is a call. But still, being away from your home for
and you
that
don't get
many
good
hours a
sleep
week,
when
you're always waiting for the tones to drop, as they
right.
call it.
So there's a reason why the burnout rate is so high.
5 years.
So anyway, he's talking about computer science. So we had a lot of discussions about computer science. Our daughter has a degree in computer science. Our youngest son is getting a degree. We have a pattern going here.
I don't have a degree in computer science.
I don't either, technically.
I'm the only normal one in the family.
So normal?
I'm the only normal one.
That's relative. Anyway, the thing that bothers me about the technology field, but computer science is the one we're talking about right now, is the way they treat people when it comes to interviewing them. They use tools. Well, let me back a step. Whenever I got out of college and I went for interviews, it was not unusual.
This was 1991.
92.
92.
It was not unusual for people to run you through the gauntlet. Where I remember I interviewed for a company, a chip company in Austin, Advanced Micro Devices, and it was an 8-hour long interview. I had to meet with 8 different people who were obviously irritated that they were asked to even meet, because they were not happy people. But they were asking questions that were completely unrelated to what I would be doing in any given day. I got really good at it because they obviously didn't talk to each other. By the end of the day, I was answering the questions perfectly, though, even though I didn't do as well at the beginning of the day, because they kept answering asking me the same question.
Well, let's not forget the one that you had a 3.495, which at most universities, that would have been a 3.5.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, but the one that you went to had to go like to the 15th digit there, So a 3.495 in computer science and engineering.
Yes.
And there was a company in Austin wouldn't even give you an interview.
GPA wasn't high enough.
Because your grade point average wasn't a 3.5.
So that's correct. So now we fast forward, but I also couldn't get any scholarships I was
going to master's degree.
Because I didn't have a 3.5. So do we put a little too much emphasis on grades? But that's not what this is about. So what they do nowadays is they don't really care what your grade point average is as much. But even if you get a degree from a major university, they give you these tests. One of them is a company called LeetCode. One of them is HackerRank, which I actually get Jared taking some of those. But they use it as a tool to basically the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google.
The big guys.
These are the big guys. They give you these interviews. They give you this test, and it doesn't matter what you have done or anything about these so-called communication skills that they want you to have,
or where you got your degree from.
All they care about is how you do on that test. And
it's a weed out tool.
It is a weed out tool. And personally, I think first of all, the people that are using it should remember those people they're weeding out are not weeds; those are people. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is one of the places I think AI can make a difference. Yes, AI has some inherent bias in it, but I think the odds of it presenting those biases and the ability for you to manage those biases is much better than it is with just regular people doing it. And I'm not saying you get rid of interviewers. I'm saying the AI becomes one of the interviewers. I watched a thing, which is what started this rant. I was watching a thing the other morning because of my son talking about this changing careers, and the CEO was being interviewed, and they always say the same thing. We want communication skills, your ability to communicate with others, work with others, work well with teams. That's what the CEO was saying. But when you go into these interviews,
he was the CEO of a major company.
He was. When you go into these companies, though, or these interviews, all they care about is whether or not you did well in LeetCode or whether or not you did well in HackerRank. I told Rachel when she was at UT, I said, you should tell the UT that this requirement, these companies doing this, is devaluing the degree.
It really is, because I heard it from numerous kids whenever I was teaching technology, because when I was teaching technology classes, Rachel was in college.
Mhm.
And I used to constantly come in and I would talk to my kids about what she was going through at the University of Texas Computer Science as a female, yada, yada, yada. I mean, we had all these conversations
Yeah.
because I think that education is really, really important. And I would talk to them about it, and I would talk to them about the hacker rank test that she would have to take. And I had several kids ask me, they were like, well, if she has to pass the hacker rank test, then why does she have to get the degree?
It's
If,
good. It's a
if,
valid
if I
question.
can pass it, then why can't I just go straight to the interview
I
process?
asked the same question about the high stakes testing that they give.
Oh, that used to bother me so
Whenever I
much.
asked the
I
counselor
think it
that
was
once,
Jacob who came home one day and said, why don't they just give me the test at the beginning of the school year? And if I pass it for the school year, just let me skip the grade.
I thought the same thing. Anyway, I think there is a disconnect between what the people at the top say they need and the people that are giving these interviews.
The laziness at the bottom.
I think part of it is, but I think if you get there is a legitimate problem. You have
Correct.
20,000 resumes come in because you're Facebook or Google. How do you decide which ones to interview? Well, I don't think that's the right way. Come up with a better way. And I think that AI could be the better way.
A lot of people do interview windows now, to where it's almost like buying a Taylor Swift concert ticket. You got to, if they say, okay, we have a job opening, it's going to open on this date, and they like advertise it, and then they open up the process, and then you put your application in, and you only have like a 24-hour window to get
Well,
your
what if you get
application in.
10,000 resumes in
Well,
that
then
window?
they cut it off whenever they get to a certain number
But
of
they get
applicants.
they could cut it off at a certain number of applicants, like buying concert tickets, like you said. But I think that if you had an AI that was going through those resumes and looking for particular things, and I know it gets back to that, what keywords do I use in my resume? But the way those used to work was a keyword search thing. Like when I worked for another big company, I remember they used to have us, when we wanted to hire somebody, we would go into their resume database and we would start looking, doing searches. Well, the searches were for keywords. With an AI, you can do more than a search for keywords. You can search for other things. You can search, people could write an essay if they wanted to, and you could use that as a basis for understanding that person. But I do not think that you're ever going to have a chance of making this process more fair and better for people's psyche, if nothing else, without a tool like the AI. And
You and I were talking about it because we've worked for companies before where we had to hire people, and unfortunately we've had to fire people.
Yeah.
And so it is very, very difficult for a human not to be biased.
well, I told you when we were talking about this thing this morning, we were trying to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. I told you that I tried very hard when I was interviewing people not to have biases. But I remember the very first time I did it, I was probably 21 years old and I was working for a startup and we had grown a lot. We were hiring people and I was hiring technicians because I ran the technology department. And a guy came in to interview and he, at the time, I'm 21, he was probably 40. And he'd probably gotten laid off from a job or something. The guy had a master's degree in electrical engineering and he was incredibly overqualified. So my statement was I didn't hire the guy because I felt like that he would just find something else to quit. Well, that's not fair. But at the same time, you think of it from a company's perspective, it takes money and time for us to train people, but you could also say you take a lot less time to train. The fact is, I really didn't give him a shot because I made that snap judgment that he was going to be wrong.
And now that you're older and you're constantly telling me, you're like, I'm going to retire in a few years. And I'm like, but you're still young. You need to go out and go get another job. You're going to be so bored. And you're like, nobody's going to hire me because I'm old. And I'm like, Tim, you are not old.
Well, it depends. And again, this is where the AI piece comes in. You start going, can we have an AI with the proper guardrails that can help us make less biased decisions? Because it doesn't
even have to have that information.
It doesn't have to know the age. It doesn't have to know the sex. It doesn't have to know your marital status or anything else that people have wanted to ask in the past.
Oh, I was asked if I was going to have kids whenever I would interview. When I was younger, I would go in for an interview, and the first thing that they would say is, "Are you married? Yeah. Were you planning on having kids?" Yeah. What does that have to do with the interview? Well, they wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be wanting to take off to have children or have maternity leave or anything like that, or insurance.
We'll get you started on that because we talk about wanting women to have kids and be family oriented, and then we discourage them by asking questions like that. I was required to take training whenever I was at Dell for how to interview people
Things you can and
and
cannot
things you cannot.
ask.
And one of the things, because I was at a vice president level in my training stuff for reasons I won't go into, but I was in the training with a bunch of vice presidents, and the guy that was giving the training was like, "Well, one of the questions: do you think it's okay to ask someone if they're currently dating or if they're currently pregnant?" And I'm like, I raised my hand. I said, "What kind of idiot would ask that question?" He goes, "Well, somebody did that worked here." He said, "That's why we're having this discussion, and that's why we're having this training, because you cannot ask this kind of question."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, I don't think I wasn't sitting in the room."
Oh,
I just called
no.
him an idiot.
He was going through training.
I just called him an idiot.
Yeah.
But I honestly never occurred to me. My point is, anyone can make that mistake.
But
Anyone
AI
can be biased. Can at least help. It can also can help you with those resumes by letting you look for
Here's the actual degree plan.
information.
Here's the actual degree plan. Here's where they went to college. Here's the classes they took while they were in college. One of the things that Rachel used to have to put on her resumes was the top like 3 or 4 classes that they said you had to have and what your grade was in those classes. So if you're just look at a transcript.
But you could also, all 10,000 people could have a conversation with the AI.
They could.
Communication skills. I think there's a bunch of CEOs out there going, you know what, we need people that communicate better, that can articulate thoughts and ideas, that can work well with other people. And they're saying, I want this. And it's trickling down to the people in the HR department who are understaffed and overworked and all this other stuff.
Not wanting to look through 10,000
and they don't want to
interviews.
look, and so they got a weed out tool, and they're using it just like people use the AI detector because it's easy.
I think
they use that tool because it's easy. AI can fix that. I
think one of the number one things that universities need to do is they need to not allow companies to recruit on their campuses that are using those programs as weed out tools.
I agree.
It's devaluing.
That's what I thought
too.
It's
devaluing the degree.
If you want to call yourself an elite school, but it puts you in the same level as every other school. You could go to a community college, but you could go to an online school. You could go to all these different schools. UT is spending all this money, or A&M is spending all this money. They're all doing all this research, doing all these things to get ranked higher. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because as long as you can get the interview and pass the one of those tests, you get the job, or at least get the next level interview.
I have come across way too many kids who have test-taking anxieties.
I'm one of those people. I take tests. I'm horrible at taking tests. You should try going through engineering school, having a hard time. Well, you were there when I was doing it. So you remember how bad I used to come home going, I just failed the test. I'm going to drop out of school. I'm going to live in a box under a bridge, and you can live in the box with me. And
and I would say, Jim, I'm sure you did fine. Sure you did fine. Sure you did fine.
I know. Anyway, we're going to run out of time. That was my rant for the week. I think AI can help with this. Think about that. Every one of those 10,000 people having a conversation with an AI, because they've become more and more personable, like Pi or
and it's a program chat that asks very specific questions.
But it also just has a conversation with you, and it judges whether or not you're able to communicate clearly, articulate your thoughts, and give you different scenarios, simulations. And it can do the work of 10,000 people. Mm-hmm. And that HR person can still be the one that does the final 4 or 5 interviews, because I still think a human needs to be in the loop. But the AI can, you stop using these weed out tools. They shouldn't be, I hate that term. Weed out courses, these are human beings, people.
They're not weeds.
These are young kids that are starting out, and it's demoralizing for them. They don't even get a callback.
Well,
they
for
send
me,
out 50 resumes. They don't even get a callback.
Well, they send out hundreds of resumes, but for me, it's definitely, I put all this work in. I've got a damn good grade point average, and you're telling me that I have to make a 95 on a computerized test before I can ever get a callback.
That's correct. Anyway, we're going to run out of time.
All right. This is AI in Action. We hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the week.
Enjoy the rant.
Enjoy the rant.